for our distinguished guests and FEB lecturer as well. Welcome to our international seminar for today. This is also the part of the anniversary of our faculty for the 66th anniversary. So, yep, I'm gonna just start now. I'm gonna introduce you to our wonderful speaker, which is Professor Shahzad Uddin. So welcome, Professor Shahzad, to our university and to Indonesia for the second time. So if I'm not mistaken, the first time was in 2015. And then, yep, it's been an honor for us for having you today as our speaker, for sharing your valuable experience, of course, on publishing papers. And then, yeah, I was your student, your PhD students back then. And then I still remember we had a very wonderful time at Essex as supervisor and students. And then I've learned so many things from you and then from other academics at Essex. And then, of course, the last time barbecue time at your house. Thank you very much. Yeah. You can easily, if you want to know more about Professor Shahzad, you can easily Google his name on the Google. You can find out so many information about Professor Shahzad. So Professor Shahzad is one of top counting professor in Europe, and then he's published so many papers on management control, for example, including labor controls, governance, and sustainability in varieties of organizational and cultural settings. And geographically, his publication draw from 5 research sites located in 4 continents. So Asia, Africa, Europe, and North America. It's very complete. And methodologically, his research is in qualitative tradition, drawing from sociology, anthropology, development economics, and philosophy. And then he's published in many top journals, not only accounting, such as Accounting Organization and Society, or AOS, Development and Change, CPA, or Critical Perspective on Accounting, VAM, Financial Accountability and Management, Triple AG, and Social Science and Medicine. This is a top journal in medical science, Work Employment Society, and Journal of Critical Realism. So Professor will give you 1 hour to present the material, and another 1 hour for question and discussion session. All right, so without any further ado, Professor Shahzad, time is yours.
Thank you very much, Vogy. I'm very pleased to get this opportunity. Also thank Professor Uddin, and thank you for the faculty. And I understand this is 66th anniversary. So your university is older than ours, I think, or very close to ours. Very, very pleased to be able to speak on your anniversary and on the topic that I like. So this is not, so it's a good opportunity for me as well. And also because of my research in, as Vogy said, in many continents, so I like to have this opportunity to have interactions with many researchers, early career or otherwise, in various forms and shapes. But in this case, we are meeting online. I understand this is difficult for many people, but also is an opportunity for other people to join from distant location. So, you know, this online seminar is giving us not only problems, but also many other opportunities so that people can enjoy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. If you see my screen, just say yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the title is already been said, crafting a research paper for top journal. So there's 2 things in these slides, in this presentation you will see. So first, what is top journal? I'll speak about that. And then second, and which is the critical part for researchers to publish papers in top journal, is how to write a good paper. And part of the process, of course, is then how to publish. So one is that big part, of course, how to write a paper, then not also significant part is how to publish. So I'll focus on those. What kind of strategy you can take after writing the good paper. But nevertheless, writing a good paper is the main thing for any researcher. Now, first, I want to sort of say that what actually we mean by top ranking. And I have to break the news. There is no scientific criteria to understand what is top ranking. And it's been debated, criticized in many ways. So what we do, as we always do, is that we look for a ranking list. We look for a list that gives us a satisfaction. Yes, the journal listed on this particular list is a good journal. But not necessarily so. This is something I have to mention at the first. There are many journals are published, not listed in this ranking, but yet they publish very good papers. But we have to start from somewhere. So usually people in Europe and also in America, they look at number of ranking list. ABS is kind of UK-based list. ADBC, Australia-based. SGR is a kind of worldwide. NSD is a Norwegian. And in America, they have no list. They have only 4 journals in accounting that you can only publish. So, yeah, so it's very, very subjective. But I would say that we sort of come up with this kind of a subjective understanding what could be the top journal. So I would rather focus on how I rather want people to sort of focus on how to write a good paper. May well be published in not very good journal, but it will be. So that's the main skill that I would like to focus on, especially for early career research. But any journal ranked in those kind of journal ranking outlet is reasonably good journal. That one could say. In accounting, for instance, there is in quantitative side, there is top 4 American journal. Then there is in qualitative side, there's a number of other journals. So I don't want to mention now, but you can have a look on those journal ranking outlet, or probably already aware of those journal ranking outlet. So let me focus on the research paper, how to write a research paper, a good research paper, and then how to submit and then publish the paper. Vogy, would you let me know when I'm finishing my 1 hour time slot, just say 5 minutes before. So that would be then give me some indication.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so let me focus on the research paper. So in any paper, you have to have certain section. I think everybody knows that. Now, for me to speak about how to write a good paper, I have to speak on each of this section. And obviously, 1 hour is not sufficient. So we would need at least 3 hours for each section. And I'll be happy to come back on each section in future time. But at the moment, I'm going to sort of speak very quickly on each section, and so that we can get a kind of preliminary idea how to write them. So any paper would start with the introduction, as we already know. So I'm talking about I'm sharing this experience from my as being an editor of a journal, also editorial board member of many journals, also as a researcher that I've been working on in the area of social science. So any good paper has to start with a particular intellectual puzzle or academic debate, I we usually refer to. If you focus on policy debate, that also be a paper, but that would not be considered as good academic paper. So in any good academic paper, you have to contribute to the academic debate. So first thing for any new researcher to write a paper, they have to think, okay, what is the debate in the area that I'm publishing, that I'm contributing to? If you simply say that I'm interested in, say, CSR in Indonesia, that would not be sufficient. So from your Indonesian context, you have to contribute to the CSR debate. So people often try to get away simply saying, oh, in Indonesia, this is not been published, so therefore it's a good paper. No, it is not. To write a good paper, one must contribute to the debate. You draw experience from Indonesian context, but ultimately that has to enhance the knowledge in the area that you're targeting. Practical importance is important, but for academic journal, that you really have to focus on the academic debate. So then that would give rise to the research question. What I'm going to show you, if I can, is that I'll relate to one of my paper that could be probably would help people to understand what I'm actually talking about, the academic debate. Okay, so I'm going to stop share this one, and hopefully I can share one of my paper here. Okay. So you can see this paper, right? Okay. Can you, Vogy?
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
It's already there. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So this paper is about CSR and politics, and I'm talking about a story from traditional setting. Basically, it's a story from Bangladesh's context. But context is important, but that did not form the paper in a sense that the debate of this area of CSR. So what I like to share here, that when I was in both these projects a bit later. So initially, Professor Javed Siddiqui was working on this paper. So they have an idea what is kind of CSR situation in Bangladesh. But if you just simply report CSR practices in Bangladeshi context, that would not be a good paper. So what we wanted to do, okay, what would be how we actually contribute to the debate of CSR? So we have done some research on the drivers of CSR. What actually drives CSR in a particular country or any context? And if you look at the literature, number of drivers people talked about, for instance, they talked about the competition, multinational companies, and so on and so forth. So many factors that people talked about. But when we reflected on our preliminary findings, we realized that one particular issue is not being really addressed. How CSR being shaped in the literature, and that particular aspect was politics. So immediately realized that debate in CSR literature, how politics drives CSR, how political ideology drives CSR, has not been addressed. So hence our point is that the academic debate will be addressed in this area if we bring this political perspective of CSR. So, and then we will be drawing the experience from Bangladeshi context to make this point. So we are making a point that the political patronage, political interests have something to do how corporations deliver CSR. So notice here, we're not talking about Bangladesh yet. We're simply talking about how politics drives CSR. So that is the academic debate we're focusing on. So, but you can draw the experience from your own context. That's in fact often the case. When you think about your own context, then you think about the literature, then you see how you contribute to the debate of the particular literature you're contributing to. I hope it is a bit clear to you. So I'll go back to my slides. So again, you must, in your paper, that focus on the debate. So any paper I read, and it comes to our journal, Journal of Accounting and Emerging Economy, I wanted to see in introduction, what is the debate you are contributing to? If I don't see it, it's very unlikely that I'll pass it on to the reviewers, because there is no point. So I rather give it back to you and say, yeah, focus on what is the debate you're trying to contribute. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, is the literature review section. I know I'm passing on very quickly for each section because we don't have much time. So on the literature review, the reason I'm talking about this, because often the literature review I see in my in journal I've received the articles from, is that people talk about many, many things. Basically, often to demonstrate the knowledge, they often bring out unnecessary, irrelevant stuff in that section. So these are the points that one has to remember when they write the literature review section. First, your literature review has to be related to the research question. So it cannot be something else. So again, I go back to the paper. I was talking about CSR and politics. So I'll focus on the drivers of CSR. So our whole literature review around the drivers of CSR, nothing else. We're not going to define CSR, for instance. We're not going to give a history of CSR. We simply focus on the drivers of CSR. So it has to be absolutely connected and focused on the research question. Then we identify that what are the key issues of this particular field. That has to be reflected in your literature section. And then you demonstrate your knowledge on very specific topic on those key issues. So do not demonstrate your knowledge by bringing everything that's in that area. Just bring your knowledge, basically refer to the key articles of that area you are trying to do. So basically bring those debates. So whoever contributed to the debate you are addressing, and bring those stuff in that your literature section. I have to distinguish between fact and opinion. You have to highlight the conflicting evidence. So this is so that's how the debate you are focusing on. You're saying, say, one group of researcher, one particular stream of research focusing on this, but other particular own research focusing on that. So you're sort of saying these are the conflicting evidence in the area. However, people have not focused on this. So this is how you progress. By highlighting conflicting evidence is for qualitative, for quantitative, for all research, this is quite an important point. Then summarize what has to be done, what needs to be done, what has been done, what needs to be done. So basically, you are coming to the end of a literature section and saying that the gap in the literature. And that would then pose a research question that you have already indicated in the introduction section. Okay, this is a literature review section of a very good paper published in Journal of Financial Economics. It's a top journal in economics and also in finance. And here we focusing on how they have reflected on each of these points I have indicated earlier. Say, for instance, relate to the research question. First few lines is about the research question. So academic literature on corporate governance examine the efficacy of blah, blah. So that's kind of a starting the literature section. Then empirical evidence to date is mixed. So this is sort of the point I was trying to highlight the conflicting evidence. So I've kind of, I don't know, in time-wise, I can go to, don't have time to sort of go through everything, but this is kind of important slide for a legal researcher, for anyone, to how they have this particular literature section addressed all the issues that I was trying to tell you to do in your literature section. So I'm not sure this particular slide with you, so I'm happy to pass on this particular slide to Vogy later time. So anyway, so moving on, the next part is theoretical framework. This is very, very important for both kind of research, quantitative or qualitative. So when you try to, in a quantitative research, when you try to focus on a particular relationship of variables, you need to focus on how they're connected theoretically. So people use, for instance, agency theory to sort of highlight the relationship between one or two other variables. So that's quantitative way of doing it. But for qualitative researcher, they can borrow, and also quantitative researcher can borrow many kind of disciplines to have kind of conceptual framework to understand or to highlight, to reflect on the findings that you will have in your paper. Now, selecting a theory for quantitative researcher is often straightforward, but usually the previous studies gives you an idea what kind of theory might be useful in your case. So it is always your own kind of journey that you have to make. So either source of theory comes from previous studies, or you yourself read the other disciplines, economics. A lot of quantitative researchers draw on economics theory, sociology, anthropology, a lot of researchers draw from those. So you select a theory you think is interesting for you. So if I go back to my paper of CSR and politics, so we thought about why politics would be connected with this CSR or business CSR. So we thought about these connections must be underlined by the societal context. So societal context, institutions often drive those kind of relationships, business and the state, the politics. Thinking about that, then we draw on Max Weber's work on traditionalism, how traditional society works. And that gave us an indication why there might be a relationship between CSR and politics. So theory gives you kind of a understanding language, or gives an explanation of what you might find in your findings. So use theory as a guide for your research question, for your findings. Often, as a PhD student or as a like a researcher or any researcher, we think about a theory, we look at our findings, come back and change the theory. Because if you feel this particular theory does not explain what I'm finding out, then you change the theory and even change the research question. So this process, this section, when you write this kind of section, you always has to be iterative. So you keep going back, rephrase those sections so that they are all in line. So it's not like you started the research question in introduction section, ended up different thing in literature review and having a different kind of theory. So you always go back and change it. So keep doing it until you submit. Yeah, so for quantitative research, I mentioned that already, use theory or updated literature to define the hypothesis. So this is on the theoretical framework. Okay, research method, another very important section. So now we have a, in the introduction and literature review, already justified the research question. You know what kind of explanatory framework you're going to have through your theoretical framework. Now you have to have a methodology or method, which will be important to collect the evidence. For qualitative researcher is one of those very important part, and often people have some issues with that. For quantitative researcher, the hypothesis is often give you some indication what kind of methodological framework you will take to collect data. But for qualitative researcher, it's not as easy, so it's very fluid often. For qualitative researcher, when they focus on the explanatory, looking for the explanations, they have to follow certain methods. So often it's involves interview, observation, or documentation, things like that. And they can follow a particular case or cases. So you have to decide what would be the right method for yourself. And also then how you analyze them, how you get your story that you wanted to tell. For case study perspective is very important. How you explain, how you analyze, how you collected it, and how you analyze those data. Because in qualitative research, you get lots of interviews, and you basically lost in the ocean of interviews, and you don't know what is that you're going to get. So in those cases, it's kind of your previous sections, which is theoretical framework, and literature will help you. Because theory is used as a guide. So use those guides to analyze your data. Again, I can ask, it's a big section to talk about. I'm just moving on. Okay, discussion. So there's often in a research paper, we have findings, then discussion, or you can have them together. So you can have a separate finding, so you just simply focus on the emerging themes of your findings. And for quantitative researcher, you just follow hypothesis and then present your statistical results. But most important thing for whatever you do is that how you actually discuss your findings is the main thing. If you research, for instance, I can go back to my own paper, CSR and politics. I simply say, this is how CSR is influenced by the political parties. So that would be a description of something. And that would not be a paper, academic paper, until and unless I say more than what is the description of findings telling us. But any journalist can write something on CSR and politics. So that will be a journalistic piece. The only point that you become different than journalist is when you reflect on those findings. When you say more than your empirical findings. When you draw insights from your findings. If you cannot do that, then you are simply a journalist. One can write a piece in any newspaper on any state of affairs. So unless you draw any kind of insight, you say more than your findings, you will not be able to write a good academic paper. So use this theoretical concept to say something more than the empirical findings. Explore the implication. So again, I'd like to go back to my previous paper of CSR and politics. So how did we draw insights from that? Is focusing on or explaining why politics would have anything to do with CSR, rather than simply saying this is the connection, this is how politics is influencing. We say why they would have it. What are the forces? What are the context? What are the reasons? What are the rationales of having these kind of connections? And use traditionalism as a concept for Max Weber to reflect on it. So we wanted to say more than what is in the empirical story. And then that will then help us to contribute to the debate of that literature that we are trying to do. So in your discussion, you say more than what is your empirical story is telling you, then you say how you actually then contribute in the broader research debate or intellectual puzzle, which you set out in the introduction section. So in other words, I would say discussion section would be a section of, is a kind of marriage between literature review section, theoretical framework section, and introduction section, and findings. So all those four sections has to be reflected in that discussion section. Because you're trying to say more than what empirics are saying, you're trying to contribute to the literature, which that means that you're bringing previous studies, and you're also trying to contribute to the debate, which is bringing your introduction section. So all sections, kind of a critical section of this, if any paper. So if I receive a paper and I see that is, okay, introduction is good, there is a debate that this paper is trying to contribute, then I move on to the discussion section and basically try to see how they have managed to put them together. Because I'm not only interested in the story that any journalist can write, I'm more interested in what the additional insight I'm receiving from this empirical story. Okay, so this is how the discussion section should be thought about. It's not easy, it's actually, easy to say, difficult to do. I understand. But it always comes from the experience. So lastly, how does it impact the state of knowledge in the literature that was reviewed earlier? So basically, I'm saying this, everything you've done in the previous section has to be reflected in this section. I can see in the chat box at least 20 kind of comments. So I haven't checked them, I'll probably come back to that later. Okay, so let me see. Okay, fine. I'm halfway through. So, conclusion. This should be kept short and set out papers contribution clearly. So basically, I would say go back to your introduction section and see what is the question and try to answer in the introduction section. And basically also answer so what kind of thing. Okay, so basically implications, contributions of the paper. Shortly, very in brief. And sometimes it depends on the journal style. So we'll come back to that in my latter part of the discussion, how you have to be clever when you submit a paper. But this is a kind of general kind of a presentation, how one should write conclusion. So usually this is, you go back to your research question, answer it, and then show the contribution. Then also talk about the practical implication, the policy relevance, if your wording limit allows, and implication for future research. What has not been done, what could have been done. And that also connected with the limitation of the study. So some acknowledgement of what you weren't able to do, and then how that might be, you can overcome it in the future work. For instance, in one of my papers that I recently published in Psychology on performance measurement in Czech Republic, and one of the Czech cooperatives. And so our theoretical framework suggested that to get a deeper understanding how performance measurement works, one needs to intensely observe the whole practice of performance measurement. But we were not able to do it. What we did is just we did the interview, and so we kind of then reflected on, look, we could have told a more deeper story, perhaps better story, have we had the opportunity to be a participant observer, because our theoretical framework suggested us to do so, but we didn't have the access to the company. And plus, we as a researcher, we are full-time academics, we don't have time to go in a company to spend 3 months or 4 months. It's not possible. So only PhD student can do that, but not always. So we reflected on those kind of limitation and said, yeah, this is what we could have done, could have been a better story, but we couldn't because of the resources, the limitation that we have. However, very important, always finish on a positive note. So often I read the paper and long list what has not been done, and that paper finishes, just finishing with the, so always question, what have you done then? So you just keep saying what have not been done. So you need to also focus on what has been, what have you done in your paper? So yeah, finish with a positive note and what has been achieved in your paper. So this is roughly the sections that I want to talk about. As I said, each section need whole workshop, and I'm happy to do it because everything is online in future opportunities. But today, this is it. And you have a question, of course, we can answer it later on. Okay, so this slide is about how, as an academic, you can plan a paper. I mean, there is a different strategy that people take. For me, is always is very useful that writing a PowerPoint presentation before write the paper. So for each section, you write bullet points. Then easy for you to sort of, okay, see whether they're consistent, whether I'm focused. So get a headlines for introduction section, headlines for literature sections, headlines for the empirical section, finding section, or discussion section. So then you basically see kind of a framework in your head before you start spending a lot of time on writing the whole thing. So it's sometimes useful, but you know, one could not do that. It's fine for others following different kind of strategy. So it helps to see the link between each section. It gives you the focus. So you can see often I receive paper, as I said, that research question, start with the research question. When I read the conclusion, I can see the different thing. So there is no consistency between the beginning and ending. And this kind of plan actually helps you to see, okay, am I focused? Am I answering the question? Is my theoretical framework in the same line that I'm arguing? Am I saying something new? So this slide kind of helps you to do that. So then this presentation would then be suitable for a conference, so it's for a seminar. So you could have take the opportunity to present this kind of slides because you already knows of your paper, and then take the feedback, and then finally start writing the whole thing as you go along. So this basically ensures that you remain focused on the overall message of the paper. You should not get too distracted by the too many details. So this is that one could follow this kind of plan, but this is not set in stone, of course. You can do different things, different ways. I'm only sharing what I thought might be useful. But nowadays, of course, my PhD students send me draft of the paper. And yeah, so that's a different kind of scenario. If I start my own paper, I'll do it like that. Yeah, okay, so this is the one. And then, okay, so writing is quite important. I think you need to think about what kind of help you can. So I follow what I call that staircasing, meaning that but it doesn't always follow, but staircasing means you start. So if you tell a story, I imagine that I'm telling a story to my audience, and I go by step. I don't tell the final story until we reach the climax. However, in some journals, they want you to write down your contribution of your paper in the introduction section. So in that case, you're telling the whole story in the summary form of the story in introduction section. That's depending on the journal. But if I have the opportunity, if I'm not constrained by the journal style, I'll tell slowly, step by step. So when reader goes down to discussion and the conclusion, they get the idea. And of course, abstract is there for people to have a brief idea of the story. Okay, so ensuring all terms are clearly defined and used consistently, and unless it is widely known. Yes, this is quite an important point, actually. That it happens when you first drop the paper, you refer to different terms when actually they're the same. So make sure they're using the same terms, consistently. And also, using the acronym is not good. It's too many acronyms. It's basically make people reader not understanding the paper. I think I was sharing some experience of Vogy just I think a few days ago. That there are a lot of acronym on budgeting, and so I said, forget this. Just write the whole thing so that people can understand, rather than using acronym. Careful about confusing word. Yes, different kind of word meaning of those words could be different. Do not change the term just for linguistics, but simply to use different words. I think often the proofreading is very useful. That could help you somebody can help you to find those kind of issues. Ensure that you use same terms, sentence to sentence. And all points should be supported by arguments or by evidence from the study or from the lectures. This is quite an important point, to be honest. When you try to say something, making an argument, you must refer to the reference so that it doesn't feel like you're making this up, or evidence. So often I say the bold statement out there, but without any reference. So it means, where is it coming from? So make sure that when you read sentence by sentence and see, is there anything you're saying are not supported by the evidence or references? If you say, for example, if you say that Indonesia has been having this financial trouble, I'm not saying they're having, by the way, just an evidence, just an example, last 20 years. You said that to me. Now, I'm thinking, okay, so what's the evidence for? Then you put a reference, then it's fine. If you don't have a reference, then you say something to support that financial trouble of Indonesian government. Okay, so just like that. So make sure that you do that. Okay, while you use references, they must be relevant. This is quite an important issue. We often copy and paste references from previous studies, and we actually don't know those references means anything. So you must make sure that this actually reviewers often, some reviewers go and read those references and see whether the references you're making are relevant to the sentence you're saying. Avoid too many references. This is also important because in some cases, especially the unlikely researcher, to show that they know they have the knowledge, to demonstrate the knowledge, they use all the references in the world for the one statement. It's not necessary. You just mention one or two which are critical. So that's also save you the word limit. So I have seen papers where that sentence was one sentence and references was 5 sentences. So this is terrible. You don't have to rely on 20 people to have a support for one sentence. So yeah, so you need to make sure that you don't do that. Avoid unsubstantiated assertions. Again, is I think point I made before. When you make a statement, either have evidence or reference. Be very careful about making more general claims than your evidence support. This is a very difficult one. It happens to everyone because often we are very passionate about our own research and a lot of things you already know, and you start making claims. And then I realize, and it often happens to me, that actually we didn't sort of have made many, either those claims are not necessary for the paper, or they're not being supported. So to write a good paper, you don't have to say many things. You say very specific things. So you have to make a very specific claim. So sometimes people, I think, don't realize that the very small claim is sufficient to publish in a top journal. But very focused, very densely supported, very specific claim. So therefore, you don't need to make a lot of things in one paper. For a thesis, yes, maybe. For a paper, very, very specific. So therefore, you don't need to say many things. Avoid long and complex sentences. This happens for young, senior, junior, all kind of researchers. And by reading again and again and again, you can make the sentences clearer, shorter, and etc. And finally, be careful with the use of past and present tense. And some journals, in fact, tells you what kind of tense you should be using. So often they say use past tense, or they say present tense. So it depends also on the journal, but whatever the tense you use has to be sort of consistent. And this kind of thing comes generally with your experience, but also there is a professional help for you to, proofreader to help you with writing good sentences. So finally, go back to our talk. What would be the good paper? What are the features of good paper? Good introduction, number one. clarify the debate you're contributing. Number two, demonstrate the scope of the literature, understanding of the literature, and obviously justify the research question. Clear contribution, empirically and theoretically. Good data set and relevant theory. Acknowledge the limitation. And then identify the potential areas of further investigation. I think in this case, very important for you, especially to focus on debate and then answering the debate. And then which means that you have a clear contribution. If you don't identify the debate, contribution will not be clear. So only time you make your contribution clear when you identify the debate of the literature. I cannot emphasize it anymore. Okay, now I'm going to this, our second part of the presentation, which is submission to publication. So now you have a good, let's assume that you have a fantastic paper. Now we have to go through the process, how we can publish it. You may have many fantastic papers lying around on your table. They will not be published until you submit. So I'm going to talk about this kind of what kind of strategy that you should take to see that through. First, send the paper to journal which might be interested to publish your article. How do you do that? Before sending your article, you need to read the scope of the journal and find out who are the targeted audience of the journal. This is quite an important for instance, for a Journal of Accounting in Emerging Economy. So the title says Accounting in Emerging Economy, correct? But we receive paper accounting in the UK. So I know what countries are emerging and what countries not emerging, but UK probably the last country, one of the last country would consider as one of the emerging economy. So there's no point sending this paper to our journal, unless it's about literature review or theory or something like that. So our readers are researchers who are interested in accounting in emerging economy. So therefore, we would publish only those stuff. That's one. Also, we receive papers from economics, from finance. Now, finance and accounting is very close, I understand, but often we receive very kind of marginal papers. So I would say, without wasting your time, you better read the scopes of the journal before send it to us, send it to any journal. Also, being strategic, you need to find out the editorial board members and editors and see what they're interested of. And see what kind of positions, what kind of areas they're interested in. And sort of get a feeling, who are these people that is going to review your papers. Make sure you have articles from the journal you're sending to. This is important, but not absolutely essential, but is important. For instance, if you send article to JE, Journal of Accounting and Emerging Economy, as long as you refer to the literature of accounting and management, that's fine. But also, it would be good to see that article published in the journal are being referred to, because it means that authors are getting familiar with the journal. But you don't have to, as long as you refer to the literature. That's the main thing. Yeah. Make sure no language problem. So please proofread before sending it to the journal. I think this is very unfortunate sometimes. I can see that articles really have good potential, but if you cannot read the article properly, then it's just no point. So a lot of papers get rejected because of this, because of poor language. Read the instruction of the journal. Again, what kind of paragraphs, how you refer to the references, how you design the abstract, to avoid those desk rejection, because there's papers will be desk rejected if you don't follow those basic conditions. So if you have a good paper and have followed this kind of basic instruction, then most likely, almost certainly, your paper will be considered for the review. So as soon as the editor send it for the review, I think it's half job done. You basically already convinced the editor that this is potentially a good paper. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent it to the reviewers. So I think if you see that paper is being sent to the reviewer from the top journal, of course, then you should be happy. Means job well done. But you'll not will do that if you don't follow this instruction, just the points I just mentioned. Okay, be strategic. Once you receive the reviews, so there's the second part. So editor send the paper to the reviewers. And that's half job done, I said. But reviewers could reject the paper, so paper half finished. In that case, you go back to the table and again work on the paper. Once the reviewers, you get the revise and resubmit decision. That I call the game begins. Because this game is about you as an author and the reviewers and editors. You must understand what game they're playing, what kind of comments they're making. So it's not about what you think is the right thing. It's all about now is what reviewers thinking. If there is an editorial comments, then what editors are thinking. So you must understand their comments. And this is often a big problem because especially in experienced researchers, they don't understand the comments. So you have to understand the rules of the game. And this is not about you being angry. This reviewers didn't understand a single thing I said. It's not like, it's not just you, and even, experienced researchers often have this kind of feelings. I have also. So when I received the paper, I read the reviewer's comments. I said, oh my goodness me, this reviewer have not read my paper. Then I put it through in my drawer for a few weeks. I read the review again. Then I start seeing the comments. I start seeing why they're making these comments. It's not about what you are trying to say. It's about what they understood, what you're trying to say. So you must, if there is a bad comments, if there are comments that you think is unreasonable, not reasonable, then you must be thinking, I must have done something in the paper that I wasn't able to give my message clearly to the reviewers. So you focus on that. So you must, okay, I have said that. Why reviewer saying this? Yeah, means that it's your fault. That you must do something in your paper so that they don't say it. So you must consider reviewers' comments and do not rush it, even if it's small revision. Absolutely not. The reason I'm saying this is from my experience again. Major revision we gave 6 months, authors send the paper following week. So this is not good. I mean, if the journals, if the reviewers, everything takes 6 months or 3 months, it's just almost impossible you can do it within a week. It means that either you have not considered, it's possible you have considered everything, yeah, I'm not saying, yeah, but it's just very unlikely. So do not do that. You must read the comments and make the suggestions as suggested. Revise the paper as suggested. And you must be careful how you actually respond to the reviewers. Don't say, done, 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 done. You explain and give indication where you have done it. And don't say, you're stupid. No, I'm sure you don't say that, but you don't indicate or imply that you have not read my paper. You rather say, if you don't agree, of course you may not agree with the reviewers. After considering their comments, after 3 months of thinking, you might come up with an idea, okay, actually, no, I cannot really agree with the reviewers. Then you say why, politely, why this your way is the best way than the reviewer's way. But I would say you definitely, before you sort of disagree with the reviewers, you definitely have to think very, very carefully why you are disagreeing. But do not disagree with the aggressive language. And that means your game is over. You may not, you should not respond. At the same time, you should not respond done, done, done kind of thing. They have to be considered. You have to, you take time. Take extension if you need. Sometimes people need time for whatever reasons, the commitment to teaching, the revision required is too much, time given is not enough. Always ask for extension, and most of the time you'll get it. So seek the extension, but you don't want to submit. As I said, when you get the reviews, reverse and resubmit situation, game begins. You do not want to leave the game. You take extension and then submit. Be firm, but polite if you do not agree with the reviewers. This is the point I mentioned earlier. Okay, I think I have reached my final slide. So also, I think, yeah, we finished a few minutes earlier than I anticipated. Good. I stopped sharing the slide, and I would hand over to Vogy if any question and answer session. I'm happy to answer your question.
All right. Thank you very much, Professor Shahzad, for the very wonderful insight from you, from your experience as well, for us about how to publish papers. Actually, we are still enjoying the lecture, so we plan to give you extra time if you want, or we just move on to the question and discussion.
No, I'm fine. I think you can go to the question answer session in just a few minutes anyway.
All right. So we move on now to the question discussion section. So yeah, before I start the session, so I want to put some points about the presentation today. In order to look at a journal, whether a journal is good or not, of course we need to see the journal rank at least. Although, as Professor mentioned, that although it is sometimes subjective and then subject to debate. And more importantly, we need also to have a good paper. Good paper, so reflected by having good introductions, literature reviews, and then of course the theory. What is the role of the theory in the research to explain empirical findings? And then the research method sections, what kind of approach we use for the paper and the discussion. So we need also to be more reflective on the discussion sections, mirrored the literature review, theoretical framework, introduction, and findings, which is as Professor Shahzad mentioned that it needs experience as well to do this. And then don't forget to answer the research question on the conclusions. So we also need to be strategic in order to submit our paper, or do our paper fit to a particular journal or not, by reading the scope, aims, and objectives of the paper. So on the question and answer, we already have 4. So probably we start one by one. The first one comes from Liz Indrayanti. So does numbers of articles referred determines the quality of our papers? Sometimes some publishers have a concern of the numbers or literature that we should use as reference. Moreover, they also limit the year of the publication. For example, cannot be too old. Is it normal? And then how much is the minimum, the number of the paper? That's the first question.
Okay, so I'm looking at the question at the moment. You already read the question for me. So does the number of articles referred determines the quality of our paper? No, of course not. Which paper you should make reference to two things has to happen. It must be relevant, first. Second, it must be the important papers. So how do you actually judge which papers are important? This is a big question, of course. What article is the top articles? What are the so it's often you get this answer from those number of citation that the papers you're referring to. For critical paper, you use, okay, this is the paper people are referring to say something on CSR drivers or on the topic, basically. So yeah, has to be relevant and has to be key article that you're referring to. That would be the expectation for a good paper that I would like to see. Okay, and he says sometimes some publishers have a concern of the numbers of literature that we should use as a reference. More of the limit, if publication cannot be too old. Yeah, so no, I think a number of references, I don't know which journal would say that, the editor might say that you're using too little references sometimes, but I don't know which journal might be saying limiting the numbers. They usually limit the number of words, and often if you put too many references, then you write too little in the main text. So you have to sort of make a balance on that. Yes, I think the number of which year, whether your literature review is outdated or not, depends on whether you are referring to the recent literature. It's quite an important point. I think I've received papers that they're referring to 1980s and 90s, and they're good articles they're referring to, but they're not focusing on 2020. So it's just odd that your literature is so old that it's not clear you actually understood or articulated the current debate of the literature. So to reflect on the current debate of the literature, one must consult the recent literature. So for instance, when I was writing paper with Vogy, I keep asking him, go back and see articles recently published in the journals that we are targeting to. So you must. But it doesn't say that you cannot refer to the old articles. You can refer to the old articles. But this must be supported by the recent articles. Okay? So literature reference must be relevant. They must be key article. They must be out. They must not be outdated, but they must be recent. But all articles can be referred. There is no particular number of how many references one should have, but reviewers might say you have not used these references or you have not used that reference. They might indicate you to go and do more literature review. That's no. Okay, is that in? Does it answer your question?
Yep. Yeah, I guess so. Thank you for answering the first question. The second one, so I will translate the second question from Sari Yuniati. All right. If the statistical results of a research doesn't support the hypothesis, the hypothesis, can it be published? The paper. I mean, if the statistical, if someone do some research and then after they perform some statistical test and then the test doesn't support the hypothesis, can it still be published, this kind of paper? That's the question.
Okay. First, your hypothesis supported by your evidence or not supported by your evidence does not bear the, doesn't influence the publication, doesn't influence the quality, because you're following your evidence. You must follow your evidence. Either support is rejected or accepted, doesn't really matter. The main thing matters. Yeah. You're saying, you're not simply saying hypothesis is accepted or rejected. You must reflect on the previous studies. So that is more important. So what is it then you're saying, adding to the literature by accepting or supporting the hypothesis or not supporting the hypothesis? So that is more important than whether it's accepted or rejected. Does this answer the question? Okay. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, from Sari. Yeah, I think so. I remember about model and lead paper is classic paper. So all hypotheses were rejected, yeah, and published in FAM. The third question coming from Hastuti Vidyaningsi. How can we find and show contribution in our paper? For example, contribution for practical theory development, methodology, etc.
It's a big question, and I've been talking about that whole time. But it's yeah. So it's a big question. Okay, let me. So I think you're probably focusing on what kind of contribution you can make in a paper. Can you make only practical contribution? Can you do contribution to the theory development, or can you make method? All three are equally valid. But when I'm just after some worry about contribution to the practical, what it possibly meaning that policy, so improvement of practice. In those cases, that is not enough for a good academic journal. If you write a good policy papers, that's fine. There are some journals who publish policy contribution, but that is not enough on its own. So you have to make more than just practical contribution. Yes, contribution to the theory development, of course. So you have to, again, contribution to the theory development will come from the debate of the theories. Then you contribute to the theories. So that's fine. As long as you identify the debate in the theory development, then provide your evidence and your argument, then yes, fine. This is a good contribution, in fact, if you can do that. Also methodology, we have papers on methodology, for instance. Again, you start the paper with the debate on methodology. So whole paper would be about methodology. So then contribution to the methodology. Yes, I think, yeah, is that enough?
Yeah, I think that's it.
Astuti, yes.
Yeah. Next question from Ananda Liana Putri. How many theories we can use for quantitative research, probably for qualitative as well? So this is also question that often arise during our during discussion for the agricultural researcher. How many theories
Yeah,
do we need to
Ananda,
apply?
yes. Very good question. People often think if they use many theories, that would be great. No, that would be confusing. So you use theory as they're needed for your hypothesis. There should not be many numbers. Could be one theory, could be two theories. Yeah, in quantitative research, I've seen people using one or two theories, three theories, multiple theories. But you don't have to have multiple theories if it doesn't make sense to your underlying relationship. So as long as you explain the underlying relationship of your hypothesis, yeah, you just use one or two or whatever theory is necessary. There's no number. In fact, for quality researcher, I think using multiple theories often challenging because of various kinds of philosophical, ontological, epistemological assumptions people make for each theories. If they're contradictory, then reviewers will come back to you. How can you use this theory together? They don't go together. For instance, if you use agency theory and then use labor process theory, this doesn't work. So if you use multiple theories, especially qualitative researcher, they have to justify why you need multiple theories. Why can you not explain your findings by one theory? I usually like simplicity, so I often I'm not interested in complex stuff. Simple, focus, small claim is my preference. So therefore, I personally never use multiple theories. Just one simple thing, one claim, one theory. Being a quality researcher for me is important. But for quantitative researcher, yeah, people can use different hypotheses, different kind of relationship they test. So different theories can be used. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for the answer. Probably follow-up questions. How about when we do our PhD, for example, how many theories do you suggest? I mean, as starting point of a PhD proposal, perhaps? Just one?
Okay, so is it your question, Vogy?
Yeah, just follow-up. Probably
okay.
It represents some of my colleagues as well. Questions.
Okay. Yeah. How many for PhD student?
Yes.
I think for PhD student, for me, you always start with the question, originality in the question, debate in the literature. That's the first thing that PhD students should think of, not theory. If theory is your sources of debate, then fine. If it is not, then focus on the debate of the literature. Basically, first think about whether the question you're asking, is it original? Has it been asked before? So that's the main thing I'll be asking to the PhD student to start with. Of course, once you focus on research question, the next bit is the broader review and theoretical framework. So that can come kind of next stage. Usually theory, I think I mentioned earlier, dictated by the research question that you're using, what previous studies have done, and so on and so forth. So for any PhD researcher, any researcher starting their career, I think always must be the debate in the literature. Okay.
Thank you for the answer. So we move on to the next one from Christopher. To convince the reviewers about the findings and interpretations, what qualitative researchers should and might do? If we can expand other authors' work, to what degree should we use their work?
To convince the reviewers about the findings and interpretation, what qualitative researcher should do. If we can expand other authors' work, to what degree should we use their work? Okay. If I understand the question correctly, I think first thing as a writer, as an author, you have to convince yourself first that whether you are saying something more than your empirical findings. That's the first thing. And then, of course, the contribution comes from the originality of the research, which means that you're saying something new that has not been said before. Which means that you're expanding somebody else's work or not. Maybe you're coming from a completely different angle. Maybe you're using some theory which does not involve anyone else's work. And if in your question, if you in particular use a particular researcher's work, of course you have to discuss a great detail how this particular model that is being extended and how they have been not been useful, what they are, how they have been limited by your findings, and why do you need to extend it, and what kind of findings, what kind of discussions that you might have to extend. So yes, a great detail. You have to, if you target a particular author's work, to extend it. Do not just simply say one sentence, because your main contribution is coming from that. If it is not a particular work, it's just a body of knowledge, then you mention this body of knowledge. You don't have to great detail on individual people's work. So in that case, more body of knowledge is your main kind of a target rather than individual work. But if it is an individual author's work, then you have to discuss those in a particular detail. If it is a body of knowledge of work developed by many people, then you have to discuss that body of knowledge in great detail. I think I hope that answers your question, Christopher.
Thank you. So from the panelists, perhaps any question from panelists? There should be some question, hopefully, from panelists before I go back to the other participant. Panelists, come on, please use this opportunity to ask questions. Any questions?
Well, actually, there are some questions. I don't think I'm a panelist. I'm Shahzad's forever student, so I'm not sure whether I'm eligible to ask this question because we do have this opportunity, right, Folk? I mean, like during our PhD jury. I mean, I don't want Shahzad ask me that you should ask this question like earlier before you finish your PhD. So anyway. I'm just wondering, yeah, I mean, because I kind of underlining some bits of the questions from the attendees as well. Thing is, regarding the previous questions from the attendees, that they have this, unsupported hypothesis, should, especially in the qualitative paper, should, I have two questions. Should there always be like, a strong, like the hypothesis development should also be brought in the qualitative paper as well? Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's quite relevant. Secondly, because, especially the hypothesis development, usually most likely referring to the quantitative ones. And secondly, now my question is, should all empirical papers perhaps should really ends up with supporting or starting with a theoretical standing, and maybe later ends up supporting a particular theoretical standing, or and especially contributing to particular theoretical standing, or just general contributions, or perhaps contribution with regards of practical or implications perhaps. So not necessarily always comes back with the additional added values upon the theory, but maybe more into the implications, especially in the practical level. I don't know, maybe you have comments on that. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah, so let me start with what you said. You should have asked this question when you're doing PhD.
Thanks for emphasizing that. See, I hope Fancom not hearing this. Yeah. Sorry, Fancom, I should answer this question for you.
No, actually, it's a good question. They're a good question. Okay, so your first question is whether you should develop hypothesis and the same way that quality researchers do. Yes, you always have to develop hypothesis, but the only difference is that in quality research we call it research question, and quantitative research they call it hypothesis. In both cases, you have to. Now, if your question was that in the quality researcher, can they use the word hypothesis, or they can you say that this is a hypothesis 1, this hypothesis 2, but in fact you have qualitative data. Usually they don't. They usually say research question 1, research question 2. So it's about kind of a language that qualitative reviewer understand. But the word hypothesis usually tested by the statistical data, and word research question usually tested by the non-statistical data. So fundamentally they're same, but it's just they're different in terms of phrasing in the word. So in quality research, people use word hypothesis. I've seen it many times, but they're using the word research question perhaps more common. But in both cases, you have to defend the question. Yeah, what's your second question? I was thinking of what you tell me about the second question.
Yeah, it is with regards of the theoretical standing and the contributions. I mean, should always comes back to that? Okay.
Yeah. Look, so there's two types of contribution, especially for the qualitative research. For quantitative research, I think is one type of contribution is basically to identify the debate in the literature, develop the thesis, hypothesis, then test the hypothesis, reflect on the literature. So that's, I say, is a kind of empirical contribution, but their hypothesis is defended by theory and previous studies. That's fine, but their hypothesis tested by statistical data. So it's a kind of empirical contribution. For quality researcher, that could be the case, or you contribute to the literature by drawing from your case study or various kinds of other qualitative evidence. So that would be a contribution to the literature. Also, in the quality research, many times that people use theory, so they develop the theory. So that would be contribution to the theory itself. So for instance, in the paper that I've referred to, CSR and Politics, we contribution to the literature, we did not make contribution to the theory itself. We did not extend Max Weber traditionalism in the paper. We simply used their theory to give me new insights. But contribution to the theory is a kind of next level. I think the best papers are usually the contribution to theory and an empirics both. Okay, does this answer your question?
Yes, exactly. Because somehow, we only use the theory to, help us to analyze the phenomenon, right? So it doesn't necessarily implying that we really adding some, something to the theory per se, but only using theory as a tool. So what you're saying is it doesn't. It's so. If I get your answer correctly, so is it fine or not fine or better? But it's still fine to submit if you only using the theory as your your classes. I mean to analyze, to help you explain the phenomenon, even though there's not like necessarily something to add with the theory per se. I mean, what do you think about that?
Look, I was joking when I said you should have been asking this question 4 years earlier, because the same thing I discussed in our brown bag workshop to our colleagues to clarify what actually contribution means. So contribution to the literature and the debate is sufficient to publish in top journal. That's the first thing.
Mm-hmm.
But contribution to theory, that is one notch up.
Mm-hmm.
That would be kind of a seminal paper.
Selling point, something.
Very good papers. They invested a lot of time. Yes, some of those papers. Some of those papers are published in low quality journal as well. It's not about the journal. It's about the paper. So contribution to theory is something I would always encourage the PhD student to do, but it's not always possible. I don't want to, challenge our students and spend 10 years for their PhD. They have to go back and pay their scholarship money to the government.
You have to go back, Vogy.
Yeah, so I rather want them to finish it as long as they are able to publish in top journal. So contribution to the literature, contribution to the debate is enough. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. And
yes,
we have been talking about it. Our colleagues have confusion about it. They're always so. Dian, you asked the right question.
Thanks, Prof. Nice for having you back. Thank you, Prof. Going back to you, Vogy. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Shahzad, for the answer. Any other questions from colleagues, from panelists?
Yes, please. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, Buanaputra, please.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Hi, Shahzad. Nice to see you again. Yeah, I have one question. Just wondering on how to justify on the reason why a researcher decided to do a grounded theory. I know that your paper is most of your paper is driven by theory, but not many scholars they adopt a particular theory. Some of them they use a grounded theory. How we can justify? Because at the end of the paper that adopt the grounded theory, they always relate with a particular theory. So what do you think about the grounded theory?
Good. So discussion now on the theory. Okay, good. I would like to say that, so if grounded theory we should discuss grounded theory when we feel that the findings that you're going to discuss is very difficult to explain using the existing theories. So if you follow grounded theory, then you follow exactly the steps that grounded theoretical methodology asks you to do. So often people say, I use grounded theory, and in fact, they did not follow the theorization process. So yes, all of my papers, in fact, is that I never use grounded theory. In fact, it's very difficult to use grounded theory because you have to follow the processes that from the beginning to the end. I can't remember exactly the process, the steps that one needs to follow, because there is a lot of literature around how to implement grounded theoretical approach. So the purpose, of course, would be if you follow this kind of methodological process, at the end of it, your paper should develop new theory. So not only just explaining your findings, but also develop the theory that can be used by other researchers. Grounded theory is not just saying that, so it actually would be a good paper to write. I mean, it's a very challenging, it'd be top-notch contribution should come from this grounded theory approach, but often people don't do that. They just simply mention, I use grounded theory, which when actually they didn't. There's a, the existing theoretical framework, often you get from the previous studies. I said that people use from previous studies use the theoretical framework to explain their own findings. But as I said, we also, rather than going to the grounded theory approach, you can go beyond the discipline, like sociology, anthropology, philosophy, and other kind of discipline, to bring the new theory, which is not you have to develop. In those cases, those theory either two purpose, either of course to explain the findings and develop that particular theory. So that would be theoretical contribution. So you either use to both ways, use this theory to explain the findings and then develop it further using you. So that would be different than the grounded theory approach. I guess this, can you, I'm not sure that I'm answering your question, Yuri. So if tell me whether that answers your question or you have.
Yeah. Yeah. And then my question regarding with your explanation earlier, in the discussion, we have to explain something beyond our finding, right? So how we can posit our position if the existing phenomena cannot be explained from the previous studies, and then I just wonder how we can again convince. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. So what I just said is it's not very complex. It's very simple for me. So if I give an example of the same paper, CSR and politics, say. So in the empirical section, for instance, we demonstrated each political party regimes and different CSR appeared in the business CSR reports. And we then also demonstrated the connection of those CSR reports to the political ideology of those parties. So every time different parties in power, and suddenly you see the companies are producing a particular type of CSR or engaged in a particular CSR activities. So that is the findings. Now, this can be done by anybody. Any journalist can go and look at the CSR report and say, oh, because of this government, they have this. So that is not sufficient insight or a good paper. So what we did then, we then try to understand why this is happening. Why and how do we theorize? How do you explain it? When I say theorize it, I mean how do you explain it? How do you sort of say something and draw insight why this is happening, and then probably reader can sort of understand that how that can be stopped in future. So from the using the traditionalism concept, then we try to understand the relationship with the society, how society works. So traditionalism explain that to us, how society works in traditional setting, and how family politics works. So all those things we received, all this knowledge we received from the traditionalism concept. Then we sort of connect them together. And say, okay, this is the concept of traditionalism, and this is the findings we have from CSR. By marrying these two, we then say, because of this historical, political, economic relationship, CSR has been happening like that, and this is how we should. This is probably will happen again and again and again, because this context is like that. So this is kind of insight we are developing. If we had not used the traditionalism concept, we would have simply stopped by simply saying there is a connection, right? Because we use traditionalism concept, we said why they exist, these connections. So that is the insight you can get from the theories. Theories also kind of for me, spectacle. You wear a particular spectacle, it gives you just one focus. You never claim, because of theory, I explain bloody everything. No, you cannot explain everything. You simply focus yourself to see something. It helps you to see it. And that's how you draw the insight from. If you don't use it, all you'll be doing that, you're describing stuff, you're describing the stages, you're describing your findings. The question is, so what? Why? Okay, we're not interested in Bangladeshi CSR political situation. We're not from Bangladesh. By explaining this traditionalism concept, marrying this concept with these findings, we made it relevant for any readers from this traditionalist concept, from this traditional setting, which means more than one country. So whole majority of the world are having this kind of traditional conditions. So in that case, paper suddenly gone from Bangladesh to worldwide. If I simply explain CSR politics in Bangladesh, people will throw this paper away. They will be saying, look, I'm not from Bangladesh, who cares about it? By using this traditional concept, we made it relevant. We draw insights, and any other reader can draw insight. They can think, oh yeah, this is what is happening in our country too, because this kind of relationship that we have. So I hope I answered the question. I could talk about it like 2 hours on this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Shahzad, for answering the question. So if I'm not mistaken, is it called theoretical generalization? Is it correct?
Sorry.
The last one. The one you explained, the last one you explained, is it what we call as theoretical generalization?
Theoretical generalization.
Yeah.
That's what it calls. So basically, you take your paper from Indonesia, make it relevant for other countries, other contexts.
All right. So there are two more questions, which is I believe it could be the follow-up question from Ms. Wuri's question as well. We have talked about how many theories, how do we use theories. Now, how do we choose the theory?
Are we taking the question with a question and answer, or is it a different question?
No, this from question answer. There are two or 3 participants asking about how to choose the theory.
Well, I don't see it. Where is it? Is it up here, Devi?
It's coming from Tusta and the other one,
yeah, there's a number
UGM
of
students. Yeah, it's on Indonesian language. So 2 similar questions. How to choose theory, particularly from a different field such as psychology. Is there any quick tips about choosing theory?
How to select a theory?
How to select a theory?
Yeah. 1 hour.
Yeah.
We need to discuss this. That simple strategy is that you, to start with, and somebody is thinking about theory, to start with, one should really read what existing study, what kind of theory existing study used in your area. So can I go back to my paper so that it be kind of consistent all the way through?
Yeah, of course.
So in this CSR and politics paper, there are a number of theories being used in understanding the CSR drivers. For instance, they use legitimacy theory, explaining why business uses CSR from the legitimacy theoretical point of view. They use stakeholder theory. They use resource-based theory. They use agency theory. So number of theories being used. So you look back to your question and see whether these theories, the use existing, are useful for you. And in our case, it wasn't. I felt very strongly, I said, none of those theories explain what is going on here in this country, in the context that I'm looking at. So I had to look on beyond what is already in the literature. So then we sort of looked into beyond the literature, means that looking at other discipline or other areas of accounting research, or other areas of management research. So it's going beyond your field. And because we used traditionalism before, then I find that kind of concept is much more useful to explain what is going on in the findings or in the question. So look at your own question, look at your previous studies on the question you're trying to address, and see what theories have been used, and think whether they can be useful. If not, go beyond your field and see what is out there. And then, so this is the way to do it. Okay? And if I want to challenge you, which is go beyond the whole discipline, which I did myself, read all this other sociology and anthropological discipline to find something that I think explain my concept, my ideas, my findings. Well, you don't have to. You can always stick to your own discipline, own field. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for the answer. So, yeah, I still remember we had 2 workshops when I did my PhD about choosing the theory. I still remember. So,
yeah.
So it's not enough to have a very short answer.
Hmm.
The next one from Fauzan. So this is a personal experience from Fauzan. I've read an editor said that it is hard to find a manuscript or article that had strong theory and strong empirical evidence at the same time. How's your opinion? So how the background of editors affect the manuscript to be accepted or acceptance of the manuscript?
Okay, Vogy, can you explain the question again? I didn't catch it.
Oh yeah, the Fauzan had a personal experience. So I've read an editor said that it is hard to find a manuscript or article that had strong theory, both theory and strong empirical evidence at the same time. How's your opinion about it?
Okay. Obviously, it's subjective opinion or subject experience of an editor. I guess that editor probably thinking about, but I have read many papers, not as an editor, but as a reader, that have both strong theory and strong evidence at the same time. So I don't think it should be mutually exclusive, or one could say it could be not many times you see with strong substantiation and theoretical with empirical evidence, that is not rare either. So there are a number of articles that we see the strong theory and strong evidence at the same time. But obviously, I don't know what context was said. That was said is I don't know, but yeah, that's my opinion, I guess.
All right, thank you. Any more questions from our panelists? Anyone?
Vogy,
Yeah.
can I ask a question to
Yeah, of course.
Professor Shahzad? Hi, Professor Shahzad. My name is Arizona from University of Mada and Vogy's College. I'm doing a PhD now. And first of all, thanks very much for your presentation. I find it very, very interesting and very relevant for me. Perhaps it's a little bit additional question. I know we have heavily discussed about theory, but basically it's my project. I have this project that in the body of literature, my research or my line of research has referred to a certain theory, but I find it that this my project needs additional theory to sort of extend my empirical results. So I'm doing is sort of adding one other theory to that, so kind of elaborate the theories. What do you take on that? And the other question is about responding reviewers. I know you have explained that our first sort of duty as an author is to satisfy the reviewers, but I have a situation where I'm not disagree with the reviewer, but it's difficult for us as authors to fulfill the reviewers' requests especially related to the data collection, because we basically don't have access to that. So what do you suggest to respond to that issue? And then the last question is about, perhaps it's about our career as an early researcher in academia. You know that in perhaps as you might have been aware that in Indonesia we have slightly different academic or research environment compared to in the UK universities or Western countries. But however, some of us perhaps want to be actively involved in international academic community. So what do you suggest for us on that? Thank you.
Excellent sort of question. If I can remember, so you obviously remind me as I go along. Okay, first question was, should I keep adding theories to explain, to justify, to defend my question or hypothesis? It's difficult to answer because it depends on if I read your paper, I would have given more specific comments on that. But I think it's also, as long as, in my view, as long as there's no, you should not feel any pressure to add more theories to defend your hypothesis. Are you a quantitative researcher or qualitative researcher?
I'm quantitative. I'm doing mostly experiment.
Okay.
Yeah.
So experiment, this is also key word, I guess. So yeah, so I think if reviewers demanding more theories, so that's a different kind of answer I would give. But in generally speaking, that one should not just keep bringing in theories to defend their research questions. Should be economical in using theories. But people use multiple theories. So one hypothesis is one theory, the other hypothesis is the other theory, that third hypothesis is the third theory. But that's probably fine with the quantitative, as long as they're kind of one single paradigm of the theories, which is mainly economist kind of theories, agency theory, research-based theory, or social capital theory. People use a different kind of theory, depending on the question. But ECS, usually I want to be economical personally with the number of theories usage. But if it is what it is necessary to defend your hypothesis, yes, do that. It's fine. The second question was how to respond to the reviewer on the data collection. I think I really feel sorry for quantitative researcher that working in the emerging economies. The reason is, if your data is about Indonesian capital market, this top journal reviewer, they begin that with a suspicion, because this is not capital market, I understand maybe, but this is not efficient capital market. So it's a weak institutional setting and stuff like that. So there is a lot of question in the head. And in America, for instance, they don't even publish capital market data in their, even if it's from the UK. So let alone data from, from Indonesia. Yeah. So collecting data, if it is challenging for you to collecting data, I think you got to be honest. At the same time, you also remember that what is the kind of overall view of the editor? What actually editor said is the key part of your response. If editor may not have said anything, then in that case, editor is kind of not taking any position on the paper. But if you read, so one reviewer asking for more data collection, the other reviewer is not asking for more data collection. They're asking maybe different things. So if more data collection is extremely difficult for you, I would say you try. You should, if the reviewer says something, you should try to do it. If it is not possible, you have to say, well, this is the access to data is extremely difficult for various reasons. So therefore, that could be a limitation of your paper, if that is relevant. So one should not be too much despondent or depressed because you cannot fulfill the reviewer's queries. But you rather be honest and explain why not. Why is it extremely difficult? And acknowledge what you're missing by not doing it. Then that would be seen as a, oh, okay, so reverse, okay, this author is self-reflecting, understood what I'm trying to say. Yeah. And your third question about this difficulty that, yeah, I mean, I made my job to, in fact, to encourage researchers from all settings, hence the establishment of Journal of Economy and Emerging Economies. I made my job is to encourage people like you to come to the fore, to develop the knowledge, develop the discipline. Not having this discipline only centered in a minority of the world, where the majority of the world are having different experiences. So yes, and I also understand the difficulty that you guys are having in terms of teaching commitment in terms of other kinds of institutional limitation. So yeah, you cannot change everything overnight. So what I can do, I think this pandemic provided absolutely excellent opportunities to do these things like that, and like attending something online, always looking up conferences online and inviting speakers online and things like that. Even if when pandemic is over, I think you should continue this. This is an opportunity. I think one other thing I would really ask you two guys to do is use your connections with external world to attend their seminars online. So, for example, my Japanese colleagues keep sending me email, can I attend your seminar? Please remember me when you have a seminar. And I'll send the link. We have no cost sending the link to. So take those opportunities, have a connections with these individual academics that you might have. In terms of access to journals, I don't know whether you have this kind of problem or not. Again, having a relationship with someone that have better access is always good. So maintain this relationship with external academics is key. And attending these conferences physically, if not possible, online is the key. So networking is the key. Yeah, and I know you guys have absolutely no time to do anything. I think Vogy was telling me that all of your lecture, I'm not putting Vogy in a bad condition here, but all I'm saying is all lecturer in those countries are having a huge workload, which we don't. Hence, we can think on our papers. So therefore, you rely on those people like me, to share your burden. Work with many colleagues externally. That is really helpful. I can give you a whole lot of other suggestions offline, but I think we have to return to other questions. Okay, so I was talking now.
All right, thank you, Shahzad, for answering the question. So, I think some question has been answered during your presentation as well. Probably the last one from participant. How to avoid offer claim of contributions?
So is it from the question and answer session or from
the question and answer, the last one?
How to find the suitable journal for a paper, how to shortlist the journal list and find the suitable ones, and how did the exploration of implications so that we are not overlooking. I think these are all good questions and will take a long time to, especially the second question. But the first one, I answered that. Right, shortlist and suitable journal. Okay, so it depends on various kinds of context and conditions that you are in. So if you're in a condition that you have to publish, of course, you're publishing top accounting journal. So first motivation should be, what is the research question that you are addressing, and then the references list that you're using to write your paper. So if you use references on a particular journal or set of journal, that's your short list. Your reference list should be the short list of your journal that you're going to submit. So, for instance, if your reference list all from Journal of Business Ethics, but you didn't submit to Journal of Business Ethics, that's a bit odd. So your reference list should be dictated your journal selection should be treated with a reference list because you're contributing to the area that's all these people are submitting to. Often you may have that you're referring to many, of course, many, there is no specific journal, but many journals. That's also fine. That means that you can choose one of those. Say for qualitative, top quality journal or quantitative journal. Sometimes the journal publishes both. Our journal, for example, publishes both qualitative and quantitative. So we take many. So, but if, say, if your paper is about, say, qualitative accounting paper, then there's, you already know, you're referencing to those papers in your paper. So all the journals like accounting, auditing, and accountability, CPA. So you know which journal reference you're using. You should know. So that's the top list. Yes. So sometimes you select the journal, submit. You read the, of course, after selecting a short list from your reference, you read the journal scopes, what kind of preferences they have, and then you decide according. Some journals, for example, is too theoretical, some journals is too empirical, some journals, so like that. So although you made reference to all those journals, but you try to understand who would be more sympathetic among those short lists, among those reference lists, who should be more sympathetic by reading the scopes of the journal, by looking at the editors, by looking at the articles they have published before. Again, we can reflect on our experience, Vogy. For example, we've been writing this paper, and then I said to Vogy, go and have a look whether they published on this topic last 5 years, or last 2 years, last year. If they're not interested in this topic, there's no point submitting. Maybe they have moved on from that debate. So we select like that. You have to go and read the scope of the journal, just see recent issues, and sort of get an idea whether they'll be interested. It shouldn't take long, 5, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 1 hour to find out about the journal. So shortlist comes from the reference list. Then from that shortlist, you go to the journal scopes and then you select the journal. Okay, that should answer your question. And second question will take a long time, I guess. I don't,
yeah.
Maybe another time we do this.
Thank you very much for answering all the questions. So, but we, unfortunately, we ran out of time. So we need to finish our session for today. Hopefully we can have more sessions like this one in the future. And then thank you very much, Professor Shahzad, for your insightful experience, and then also some tips and tricks in publishing papers in top journal. Although, yeah, it's like you mentioned, it's easy to say, but it takes time to do it. It's sometimes difficult and takes some experience. But as academic, I believe that we should keep committing to the research. Thank you very much. So I'll
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. I thank you for allowing me to speak. That's my pleasure. To hopefully this will be seen by many academics in Indonesia, and get to know some of you. At least I can see some of the faces, and I can see. And Dono is here too somewhere. He said.
Yeah. It's coming. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Shahzad. Bu Anissa, put it back to Bu Anissa.